Hello everyone and welcome back. Today we're going to be looking at two powerful mapping softwares, CalTopo and OnX. What we're comparing is slope angle shading, LiDAR, and 3D maps when used in conjunction. And why this matters is that it's easy to miss some of this stuff when you're e-scouting, and that translates into something that you might miss when you're in the woods. And when it comes to these big bucks, we don't want to miss anything. Some of the key things we're going to look at here are cliffed out areas and the different ways that you can see LiDAR and what that means for the whitetail hunter. So let's get right into it. OnX on the left, CalTopo on the right. I've tried to place the crosshair at the bottom end of this S-curve in the creek on both maps. Both maps are at the 100-foot scale. If you're wondering where this is at, it's kind of in the middle Kentucky area. It's on private land. But this is just a good example that I could find. In both applications, we'll go through OnX first here. Click on the base map layer, bring it up. We see that the topo map is brought up. You don't have one choice for a topo map here, and it's set to 3D with LiDAR on. And I'll just point out that LiDAR is relatively new for OnX. Over here, if we click on the base map layers, we can pull up the land and access, and we have slope, angle, and aspect pulled up here. So that's a couple of menus deep for those wondering. And then since we have slope, angle, and aspect selected, your opacity slider comes up here at the top, and these are the same colors and elevations just about for both applications. We'll talk a little bit about that. There's more blacks over here on the right for CalTopo. Slide over here to CalTopo on the right, and you have shaded relief. Select the normal. For base layers, CalTopo has several options. You have Map Builder Topo, you've got Scan Topos, Forest Service 2016 Topos, and a TF Outdoor Topo map. But I like these shaded reliefs because the terrain just really pops. Right down here as a map overlay, and you can see all of your overlays that CalTopo offers are on the screen, including ones that you've created yourself here. So slope angle shading, we selected it, and it's in gradient. And we'll turn this map builder overlay off so no roads or whatever pops up. On CalTopo, you don't have that option. Your roads are just on the screen automatically. And one thing about OnX is all of your tools are right on the screen. These are geared towards the hunter. You do have to click to get down into your layers. In CalTopo, 3D is here. 3D maps are relatively new for CalTopo. You'll get a little instructional box that pops up. I can't get it to replicate because I told it not to make it pop up anymore. It's basically you use your shift key and arrow keys, or if you are on a phone, it's just, you simply pinch the screen like you would for zooming in and zooming out, and then you would rotate the screen with your fingers kind of in a circular motion. Add lines and polygons and the different kinds of waypoints and things like that, you would click here. I also use range rings just to kind of figure out how far things are from scrapes and things like that. You also have your color scheme for your map down here at the bottom. 20, 28, 40, 55, and black is 60. When you see the purples on the map and the blacks on the map, that's almost like cliffed out. One other thing to note here is that in OnX we have to go down and click on land and access, and with LiDAR and OnX you click here and you have the option of turning LiDAR on or off. In CalTopo, it's just built right into the shady relief maps. Have their strengths and weaknesses. It's really up to the end user and how they see these maps, in my opinion. This isn't about sliding one application over the other. Both tools are powerful and they have their pros and cons. Let's look at two secondary ridges that we see here and see what jumps out. We've set it up in a 300-foot scale and put the cursor right here at the end of this bench that runs along through here next to a logging road that comes down the spine of the ridge on a southeast facing slope with a lot of steep areas as shown in red and yellow here. Over here in CalTopo, you got the cursor set to the end of the bench that runs up and down through here. We have the map set at 300 feet. I wanted to show you what it looks like when we toggle. 3D map is now on in CalTopo. So if we just scroll in and then place the cursor back here at the end of this bench, That's in 100 feet, so we'll move it back out to 300 feet. In CalTopo, if you pinch your screen, you can move it in and out to get close or as far away as you like, and you can really see these ridges pop. Over here in OnX, we can zoom in and out to see what things look like. You can take the opacity slider and move it left or right. This almost gets you back to their base layer topo map. All the way to the right, you can see edges real nicely here. The greens show up. I think the whites show up better in CalTopo down here in the creek bottoms. These reds and yellows look nice right over here where you can see a super red area. There's one up here. These are the more steep areas. There's also a good bit of the blues right up here along this ridge line. Over here in CalTopo, we can clearly see that this is a cliffed out area due to the fact that it's purple, and our scale down here from blue to black is just basically cliffed out. I find these red areas super steep too. Most of the time these deer trails are running right along the edges of these steep areas, right where the dark green meets the yellow most of the time, because the deer don't want to be on a cliff just like we don't want to be on a cliff. But I do find a lot of rubs right along through here, especially when it's coming up from a thermal hub situation. Like this is a double thermal hub right down here. Let's take a look at a couple things here. These purples to me really pop and show me exactly where a cliffed out area would be, and then it switches to yellows and reds all the way along. There's some more clipped out areas down here along this creek. You can also see this bench. This bench runs all the way up this secondary ridge. If we zoom in just a bit, you can see these LiDAR roads that come right down the spines of these ridges really look good. Also in the creeks, you can see that there are some whites indicating deer could very easily cross the creek right here, whereas up here where these shades of dark green are at, it's likely that there's not going to be a very good crossing up here. The best crossing would probably be at the ends of the steep stuff. By comparison, if we look over here at OnX, we just see a big swath of red up and down through here, so I'm not real sure where the gaps in this red stuff might be. We can move this opacity slider from left to right and see a little bit more clarity, but you would basically be reading the terrain at this point and not the shades of red and yellow. It's very difficult for me to see the logging road, although I do know it's there, and I can see a very light little trace of LiDAR down through here. The same is true for the bench that runs around here. It does show up a little bit better on the OnX map. So when I'm e-scouting, I'm limited by where I find the gaps, and then where the gaps meet the bench, and where the bench over here meets the logging road. To me, the bench in OnX just lacks that visual separation from slope, whereas over here in CalTopo, I can clearly see the visual separation in these areas where gaps in the steep terrain might be at. Key takeaways that I think are important when you're looking at these ridges. Up here at the tops are where your topo hubs are at, and these bucks are traveling from down here in these thermal hubs to get up to these topo hubs where there's likely more scrapes and more does. When I see these gaps in terrain, I want to know where they're at. I want to know exactly where the cliffed out areas are at. I want to be able to see where the bench might meet one of these gaps that come up from the bottom as well, so that I can follow the right places in order to find the sign that you need to have in your back pocket. Also, what's missing on a map, like over here in OnX, where you can't see these gaps in the steep stuff, this could cost you daylight movement insight that you need, particularly if you're setting up on, a buck that's moving from the bottoms back up here to the tops. We'll move our maps over to similar places. Here in this curve, you can see the LiDAR here on the OnX map running up the spine of the second ridge. Both of these ridges are kind of orientated in a north to south fashion. Ridge 1 being more from northeast to southwest, Ridge 2 being more from northeast down here to the southwest. A couple things that pop out to me on both maps really is that right up here on the spine near the top, well, I guess that would be middle secondary ridge, so there's a lot of LiDAR that's popping on this map, which to me indicates usually that at some point a timber cut has occurred. I found a lot of logging decks when LiDAR looks like this right here, it's either that or it's where, you know, because it's private land, where somebody's spending a lot of time up here on the top. But in the cases where these are logging decks from timber cuts, I want to check these out all the way around the edges of these, because, you know, logging decks are cleared areas, and the trees come back a lot thicker, so there's usually very thick spots in these areas. But one of the things I want to do here is just move this opacity slider in OnX a good bit, and see, I can see the LiDAR up here on top. So this is a spot that's probably going to have some bedding. It's probably going to have a scrape out here on one of these flatter areas. If I look over here on OnX, the whole secondary ridge spine here is white. That tells me it's nice and flat up there, probably, you know, in that 50-yard range. Let me just measure here with the distance, and that is 44 feet, so in other words 15 yards for us bow hunters out there. But what I like about this ridge, we can see a couple things here. Again, it's part of a dual thermal hub. I want to be looking in these flat areas right at the bottoms of these ridges. But one of the things to point out here is that, you know, at the ends of these ridges, I want to know where these bucks that climb up, these older bucks, are going to climb up and immediately gravitate over here to this red and yellow area on both sides of the ridge, east and west. And they're going to make their way up. And, you know, I'm looking for pinch points. So right here, where this may be a logging deck that's grown up and real thick, and where this old LiDAR looks like, you know, where the logging trucks were trying to get down here a little bit further, they meet in a pinch point. And these are the areas where I find a lot of big rubs at. Similarly over here in OnX, when we get to just the base of the logging deck, it's more difficult for me to find exactly where the edge is. When I look at OnX and I see all this yellow here, and there's, you know, definitely an edge over here on this red stuff, but where all this comes together at, I want to put a waypoint here that forces me to go in here during boots on the ground scouting, so that I can find exactly the point I saw on the map while I was at home doing the e-scouting. I'm just going to turn this map builder overlay on so you can see a similar comparison. I noticed a power line running across through here, and I know many people hunt these power lines and they also create a distinct edge, so I like that. For these two comparisons is that, you know, I'm able to see key bedding areas, you know, these terrain funnels that are produced by, you know, the more visible LiDAR and the more distinct gradient shading, so that I can see these gaps in these steep areas and where these steep areas actually end and where they begin. Connecting these e-scouting dots is why we do this stuff. Better setups equal higher odds of these mature buck encounters. CalTopo and OnX both have value. Clarity and visibility can significantly impact how fast and how well you scout. So if you're a hunter that wants to scout with more purpose and find the things that others miss, subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and good luck out there. These horseflies are terrible. Does anyone have a blind that was blown over by Hurricane Helene?